Episode 64, April the 24th, 25th, 1915. My Own Dark Hours, as Commander-in-Chief at Gallipoli, by General Sir Ian Hamilton, GCB, GCMG DSO. Read by Nick Lucas. Sir Ian Hamilton has long been recognised as one of the greatest writers on modern warfare. Nothing exceeds the brilliance and urgency of his account of the ill-fated campaign on the Gallipoli Peninsula. He was in command of the Mediterranean Expeditionary Force and shared to the full the trials and tragic adventures of his men. His story continues in Chapter 65. On April the 24th, the Queen Elizabeth anchored off Tenedos just before 4 p.m. and lay outside the roadstead. Close by us was the British fleet with an armada of transports, all at anchor. As we were closing up to them, we spotted a floating mine, which must have been passed by touch and go during the night by all those warships and troopships. A good omen, surely, but not one of them fell foul of the death that lurks in that ugly, horned devil. Not dead itself, but very much alive, for it answered a shot from one of our 3-pounders with a dull roar and spitting of fire and smoke, bred for our benefit by the kindly German Kultur. Our Queen Elizabeth chose the cold grey hour of 1 a.m. on April the 25th to make her war toilette. By 4:15 she had sunk the Lady and put on the man-of-war. She was cleared for action now, and so are we. If this is a queer start for me, so it is also for de Robeck, the commanding admiral. A fleet lies in the grip of its admiral like a platoon in the hands of a subaltern. The admiral sees, speaks the executive word, and the whole fleet moves, not as with us, each commander carrying out the order in his own way, but each captain steaming, firing, retiring to the letter of the signal. In the Navy, the man at the gun, the man at the helm, the man sending up shells in the hoist, is an automaton, unless indeed the gear goes wrong and he has to use his wits to put it right again. With us, the infantry scout may have to decide whether to open fire, to lie low, or to fall back, whether to bring on a battle or avoid it. But the fleet today is working like an army. The ships are widely scattered, each one on its own, except in so far as wireless may serve. And that is why I say Admiral de Robeck is working in a way just as strange to him as mine is to me. My station is up in the conning tower with de Robeck. The conning tower is a circular metal chamber, like a big cooking pot. Here we are, all eyes like potatoes in the cooking pot, trying to peep through a slit where the lid is raised a few inches, ad hoc, as these blasted politicians like to say. My staff are not with me in this holy of holies, but are stowed away in steel towers or jammed into 6-inch batteries. At 4:30 a.m. we were off Sed Albar, all quiet and grey. Thence we steamed to Gaba Tepe, and midway, about 5 o'clock, had a very heavy fire from Helles behind us. Now we are off Gaba Tepe. Day was just breaking over the jagged hills. The sea was glassy smooth. The landing was in full swing. Shrapnel was bursting over the water, the patter of musketry, the machine guns spluttered. Would we be out of it? No, not one of us. Not for 500 years, stuffed full of dullness and routine. 5:35, the rattle of small arms died down. 4,000 fighting men had been landed, boatloads still making for the land, swarms trying to straighten themselves out along the shore, other groups digging and hacking down the brushwood. They did not look bigger than ants. God, one would think, cannot see them all, or he would put a stop to this sort of panorama. And yet it would be a pity if he missed it. For these fellows have been worth the making. They are not charging up into this Saribaya range for money or by compulsion. They fight for love, all the way from the Southern Cross for the love of the old country and of liberty. Wave after wave of the little ants press up and disappear. We lose sight of them the moment they lie down. Bravo! Every man on our great ship longs to be with them. But the main battle called. The Admiral was keen to take me when and where the need might most arise, so we turned south and steamed slowly back along the coast to Cape Helles. Opposite Kritia came another great moment. We have made good the landing. It is a fact. I have to repeat the word to myself several times. Fact, 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 so as to be sure I am awake and standing here looking at live men through a long telescope. The thing seems unreal, as though we were in a dream instead of on a battleship. To see words working themselves out onto the ground, to watch thoughts move over the ground as fighting men. Both battalions, the Plymouth, Royal Marines and the Cosbys, had climbed the high cliffs without loss. So it was signalled. There is no firing. The Turks have made themselves scarce. Nothing to show danger or stress, only parties of men struggling up the sandy precipice by zigzags, carrying munitions and glittering kerosene tins of water. Through the telescope, we can now make out a number of our fellows in groups along the crest of the cliff, probably smoking. This promises great results to our arms, not the smoking, of course, for I hope that won't last long, but the enemy's surprise. In spite of Egypt and the Egyptian Gazette, we have brought off our tactical coup. The bulk of the Turks are not at Gaba Tepe. Here at Y, there are none at all. If the Australians get through to Maltepe, the whole Turkish army on the peninsula will be done in. If this Y Beach lot press their advantage, they may cut off the enemy troops on the toe of the peninsula. Braithwaite, that's General Sir Walter Braithwaite, GCB, Sir Ian Hamilton's Chief of Staff, has suggested that the Naval Division, who are making a feint against the Bulair line, might be put in there to reinforce at Y. The idea appeals to me strongly, because I have been all along most keen on the Y Beach plan, my own special child, and this would be to make the most of it. But until the main battle develops more clearly, I must not commit the only troops I have in hand as my reserve. At X Beach, the foreshore and cliffs have been made good without much loss, though there is a hot fight going on just south of it. But fresh troops will soon be landing. So far, so good. Farther round at W Beach, another lodgment has been effected, very desperate and bloody, we're told, by the naval beach master, and indeed we can see some of the dead. But the Lancashire Fusiliers are in possession, though we don't seem yet to have penetrated inland. By Sed al-Bahr, where we hove to about 6:45, the light was very baffling. The land wrapped in haze, sun full in our eyes. Here we watched as best we could over the fight being put up by the Turks against our forlorn hope on the River Clyde. Very soon it became clear that we were being held. Through our glasses we could quite clearly watch the sea being whipped up all along the beach and about the River Clyde by a pelting storm of rifle bullets. We could see also how a number of our daredevils were up to their necks in this tormented water, trying to struggle onto land from the barges linking the River Clyde to the shore. There was a line of men lying flat down behind the cover of a little sandbank in the centre of the beach. They were so held under fire they dared not evidently stir. Watching these gallant souls from the safety of a battleship gave me a hateful feeling. Roger Keyes said to me he simply could not bear it. Often a commander may have to watch tragedies from a post of safety. That is all right. I have had my share of hair's breadth business, and now it becomes the turn of the youngsters. But from the battleship, you are outside the frame of the picture. The thing becomes monstrous, too cold-blooded, like looking on at gladiators from the dress circle. So soon as we saw that none of our men had made their way farther than a few feet above sea level, the Queen, that's Elizabeth, opened a heavy fire from her 6-inch batteries upon the castle, the village, and the high steep ground ringing round the beach in a semicircle. The enemy lay low. At times the River Clyde signalled that the worst fire came from the old fort and said El Bar. At times that these bullets were pouring out from about the second highest rung of seats on the west of that amphitheatre in which we were striving to take our places. Ashore, the machine guns and rifles never ceased. Tick-tack, tick-tack, brrr, tick-tack, tick-tack, brrr. Drowned every seconds by our tremendous salvos, this more nervous noise kept creeping back insistently into our ears. When we saw our covering party hung up between the castle and the deep sea, we had to issue fresh orders to the main body. Useless to throw them ashore to increase the number of targets on the beach. Roger Keyes started the notion that these troops might well be diverted to Y, where they could land unopposed, and whence, by threatening the Turkish line of retreat, they might help their advance guard at V more effectively than by direct reinforcement. The suggestion seemed simple common sense. If it did not suit Hunter Weston's book, that's General Sir Aylmer Hunter Weston, commanding the 29th Division, he had only to say so. Certainly he was in closer touch with these landings than we were. It was not for me to force his hands. There was no question of that. So at 9:15 I wirelessed as follows. GOC&C to GOC Eurilius. Would you like to get some more men ashore at Y Beach? If so, trawlers are available. 3/4 of an hour passed. The state of affairs at Sed El Bar was no better, and in an attack, if you don't get better, you get worse. The supports were not being landed. No answer had come to hand, so I repeated my signal to Hunter Weston, making it this time personal from me to him, and ordering him to acknowledge receipt. Lord Bob's wrinkle. General Hamilton to General Hunter Weston, Eurilius. Do you want any more men landed at Y? There are trawlers available. Acknowledge the signal. At 11 a.m. I got this answer. From General Hunter Weston to GOC, Queen Elizabeth. Admiral Weems and Principal Naval Transport Officer state that to interfere with present arrangements and try to land men at Y Beach would delay disembarkation. HMS Cornwallis ought to have been back from Morto Bay long ago. All sorts of surmises. Now we hear she has landed our right flank attack very dashingly, and that we have stormed de Tort's battery. How I wish we'd left V Beach severely alone. Big flanking attack at Y and S might have converged on Sed Al Bar and carried it from the rear, when none of the garrison could have escaped. But then, until we tried, we were afraid that fire from Asia might defeat de Tort's battery attack, and that the Y party might not scale the cliffs. I should doubt if the Turks are any great force. Quite clearly the bulk of them have been led astray by our feints and false rumours. About noon, a naval officer, Lieutenant Smith, a fine fellow, came off to get some more small-arms ammunition for the machine guns on the River Clyde. He said the state of things on and around that ship was awful. Spoken by a youth now on his mettle, to speak with calm, and one felt he meant bloody. The whole landing place at V Beach is ringed round with fire. The shots from our naval guns, smashing as their impact appears, might as well be confetti for all the effect they have upon the trenches. The River Clyde is commanded and swept by rifles at 100 yards range. Her own double battery of machine guns, mounted in a sandbag revetment in her bows, is preventing the enemy from actually rushing the little party of our men crouching behind the sandbank, but the sea at Sed al-Bahr has turned red. At 1:30, I heard that Damard, the French commander, holds Koum Kale. De Robeck has already heard independently by wireless that the French, the 6th Colonials under Nogues, had carried the village by a bayonet charge at 9:35 a.m. On the Asiatic side, then, all's well. The Russian Askold and the Jeanne d'Arc are supporting our allies in their attack. Have told Damard that he will not be able to disembark at V as arranged, but that he will have to take his troops round to W and march them across. At 2 o'clock, a large number of our wounded, who had taken refuge under the base of the arches of the old fort at Sed al-Bahr, began to signal for help. The Queen Elizabeth sent away a picket boat, which passed through the bullet storm and most gallantly brought off the best part of them. Soon after 2 o'clock, we were cheered by sighting our own brave fellows making a push from the direction of W. We reckon they must be the Worcesters and the Essex men, moving up to support the Royal Fusiliers and the Lancashire Fusiliers. The new lot came along by rushes from the westwards. We prayed God very fervently they might be able to press on, so as to strike the right rear of the enemy groups encircling V Beach. At 3:10, the leading heroes, we were amazed at their daring, actually stood up in order the better to cut through a broad belt of wire entanglement. One by one, the men passed through and fought their way to within a few yards of a redoubt dominating the hill between beaches W and V. This belt of wire ran perpendicularly, not parallel, to the coastline, and evidently been fixed up precisely to prevent what we were now about to attempt. To watch VCs being won by wire cutting, to see the very figure and attitude of the hero, to be safe oneself except for the off chance of a shell, was like being stretched upon the rack. All day we hung vis-a-vis this inferno. With so great loss and so desperate a situation, the white flag would have gone up in the South African War, but there was no idea of it today, and I don't feel afraid of it even now, in the dark of a moonless night, where evil thoughts are given the most power over the mind. Nor does Hunter Weston. As we were snatching a hurried meal, he came on board. After he had told us his story breathlessly, and listened to with breathless interest, I asked him what about our troops at Y. He thought they were now in touch with our troops at X, but they had been through some hard fighting. His last message had been that they were being hard pressed, and as he had heard nothing more since then, he assumed they were all right. To sum up, the French have dealt a brilliant stroke at Koum Kale. We have fixed a grip on the hills to the north of Gaba Tepe. Also, we have broken through the enemy defences at X and W, 2 out of the 3 beaches at the south point of the peninsula. The hold-up at the 3rd, V, or Sed al-Bahr, is bad. It would never do if we were forced to re-embark at night, as has been suggested. The background of my mind is loaded with anxiety lest help should reach the enemy before we have done with Sed al-Bahr. The enveloping attacks on both enemy flanks have started brilliantly, but have not yet cut the enemy's line of retreat. At S, Morto Bay, the 2nd South Wales Borderers have landed under fire from big fortress artillery, as well as field guns and musketry. On shore they deployed, and helped by sailors from the Cornwallis, have stormed the Turkish trenches. They are now dug in on a commanding spur, but say they do not feel strong enough to advance. From Y, opposite Krithia, there is no further news. But 2 good battalions at large, and on the warpath some 4 or 5 miles in the rear of the enemy, should do something during the next few hours. Whatever else may happen, we have proved there are no other soldiers quite of the caliber of ours. They have an esprit de corps. They are volunteers, every one of them. They are for it. Our officers, our rank and file, have been so entered in this attack that they will all die, that we will all die, sooner than give way to the Turk. The men were not fighting blindly, as in South Africa. They are not fighting against forces with whose motives they half sympathize. They have been told, and told again, exactly everything. They understand. They know that the war can only be brought to an end by our joining hands quickly with the Russians. They know that the fate of the Empire depends on the courage they display. Should the fight so decree, the whole brave army may disappear during the night more dreadfully than that of Sennacherib, but assuredly they will not surrender. Where so much is dark, where so many discouraged, in this knowledge I feel both light and joy. As night began to settle down over the land, Queen Elizabeth seemed to feel the time had come to give full vent to her wrath. An order from the bridge, and in the twinkling of an eye she shook from stem to stern. The great ship is fighting all out, all in action. Every gun spouted flame, and a roar goes up fit to shiver the stars of heaven. My ears stopped with wax, eyes half blinded by the scorching yellow blasts. Still, in some chance seconds' interval, we could hear the hive-like of the small arms playing on the shore. Still see, through some break in the acrid smoke, the profile of the castle and houses, nay, of the very earth itself and the rocky cliff. See them all change, break, dissolve into dust, crumble as if by enchantment into strange new outlines under the enormous explosions of our 15-inch lyddite shells. Buildings gutted, walls and trenches turned inside out and upside down, friend and foe, surely must be wiped out together under such a fire. At least they are stupefied, must cease taking a hand with their puny rifles and machine guns. Not so. Amidst falling ruins, under smoke, clouds of yellow, black, green, and white, the beach, the cliffs, and the ramparts of the castle began, in the oncoming dust, to sparkle all over with hundreds of tiny flecks of rifle fire. Many of our men, who had been crouching all day under the sandy bank in the center of the arena, were taking advantage of the pillars of smoke raised between them and their enemy to edge away to their right and scale the rampart leading to the fort of Ser el-Bahr. Other small clusters lay still. They have made their last attack. Now try to sleep. What of those men fighting for their lives in the darkness? Might they not, all of them, be sailing back safe to England but for me? And I sleep? Well, why not? I must sleep while I may. The legend whereby a commander-in-chief works wonders during a battle dies hard. He may still lose the battle in a moment by losing heart. He may still win the battle by keeping a stiff upper lip. The old Bible idea of the commander. When his hands grew heavy, Amalek advanced. When he raised them, Israel prevailed. But nowadays, in precise proportion as his orders have been thorough, so will the actual conflict find him leaving the struggle to the troops. Old Oyama cooled his brain during the Battle of the Shaho by shooting pigeons sitting on Chinese chimneys. My own dark hours pass more easily in making these jottings. Writing takes the strain off waiting. No order can be issued until I get reports. I can't think now of anything left undone that I ought to have done. I have no more troops to lay my hands on. Hunter Weston has more than he can land tonight, and I won't win this battle by prowling up and down the gangways. No word yet about the losses, except that they have been heavy. If the Turks get hold of a lot of fresh men and throw them upon us during the night, they may knock us off into the sea. No general knows his luck. That's the beauty of the business. But I feel sanguine all the same. The Turkish troops here will get no help tonight, and ours pour steadily ashore.
Brother Bert, he went away to do his bit the other day. With a smile on his lips and his lieutenant lips upon his shoulder, bright and gay. As the train moved out, he said, remember he told the birds, though he wagged his paw and went away to war, shouting out these affairs.